Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host and the most prominent political commentator in Lions Bay, BC. Welcome back to the show, Rafe.
Thank you very much, Jim. Always a pleasure.
Landmark agreement in British Columbia, the Great Bear Rainforest Agreement that'll protect 85% of it from logging and other exploitation, and they'll have very strict rules for the development of any other parts of it. I remember 20 years ago the government denying that such a thing as the Great Bear Rainforest even existed.
Or the bears themselves. You're quite right. I'm sort of still a little stunned by this because I quite frankly didn't think that it was going to come together. And, you give credit where credit is due. It has come together. My sort of reaction when I read it for a while today, and I just sent around a little blurb to people that I know, one thing we must remember, this would never, ever have happened without massive civil disobedience. And, we now got everybody patting themselves on the back and lovey-dovey and so on, but it sure as hell wasn't that way all along the way. And I think people who are really upset about pipelines and LNG plants and that sort of thing should remember that this didn't happen just because everybody suddenly decided to be nice. But there we are. It's very encouraging to me in any event, and let's just see what happens.
Well, Rafe, BC collects billions in revenue from ecotourism. I still find it hard to imagine that they still allow grizzly and wolf trophy hunting.
Well, it's pretty inconsistent, isn't it? You can't go into the bear's cave, but you can stand outside and shoot the poor bugger as he walks out. There's a lot of inconsistency in it. I can only hope, Jim, that this means that it's the start. That this will change in due course, or gradually change in due course. I think that the mood of the public is certainly that way, and let's just hope.
The rest of Canada still can't imagine why British Columbians are so adamant about why they don't want pipelines and so on. After all, Alberta's economy depends on it. But do they understand how precious this forest is and how little of this kind of land and resource is left on this planet?
Well, I frankly, Jim, have become very impatient with the rest of Canada. And particularly with, what's his name, the CBC guy that I usually like watching, who was all hot and bothered about the mayor of Montreal. This business of it's all for the nation and all the rest of that sort of stuff, it seems to me that always happens when it happens to be very good for Bay Street as well. And people don't think about other people's land. Here we have, and just think about this for a second. Here we have the tar sands condemned as the worst polluter by far in the entire world. And we in British Columbia are told, oh, you better take pipelines because how else can Alberta exploit its tar sands and get the product to the market? The whole thing just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And as far as I'm concerned, I've got to the point now where it's sort of stand our ground and just don't let it happen. Whatever means possible. We can't have it both ways, Jim. We can't have all kinds of oil and LNG and coal and all of the rest of it being mined and exported and all the rest of it, and put the money in our pocket, have a wonderful time, and then at the same time say, oh, we're not contributing to global warming, we're not contributing to any of the atmospheric problems we're having, and we're good little boys and girls, we're keeping up to our standards, and we're weaning ourselves off fossil fuels. You can't have it both ways. It's one or the other. If we're deciding we're not going to continue to pollute the atmosphere, etc., we have to steadily, perhaps a little slowly, but steadily wean ourselves off, find alternative sources of energy, and tell Alberta to go to hell. It's just that simple.
The Alberta government says it will subsidize up to $500 million the building of new petrochemical plants. So maybe their theory is instead of sending toxic sludge down a pipeline, perhaps refined product would be more acceptable.
Well, at the end of the day, though, it's the same thing, isn't it? When you get right down to it, even if you found a way to take the tar sands in Alberta and invisibly and without any impact whatsoever get the product of that magically out of the country into China, Japan, wherever it is, still at the end of the day it's being used and it's contributing grossly to the problems that we have in the atmosphere. And, you know, I'm not saying, and I don't think anybody else is saying, you've got to stop tomorrow afternoon, but you've got to stop sooner or later. And you're not going to stop by pretending you don't have to. And unfortunately, this is the way we are. And sure, it's going to be painful. Yes, there are going to be jobs that are going to be lost. Yes, communities are going to suffer. But again, you can't have it both ways. You can't have communities prosper and at the same time get the benefits as if they had sacrificed. You either sacrifice or you don't. And I think we just have to. And it pains me to see this happening. It's again, there's something pretty inconsistent when the entire country cheers the Great Bear Rainforest decision and headlines all across the country. And yet, at the same time, if we decided to stop a pipeline going through there, which they'll have to do, all hell will break loose. I mean, where are we on this?
Another thing that's happened here in BC, preliminary approval for the Garibaldi Ski Resort, which would be about halfway between Squamish and Whistler, about an hour's drive north of Vancouver. The mayor of Squamish is against this development. What is the opposition to another site that would provide a lot of jobs?
Well, I'm sitting here looking at one of the oppositions to it, Jim, the Sea to Sky Highway. It barely contains what it has now. Everybody thinks that the Liberals a few years ago and before the Olympics got the Sea to Sky all in apple pie order. That's just not so. You get past my place in Lions Bay, and you go for miles as a 2-lane road. And we still have accidents and deaths almost every day. That's without this additional traffic. With this additional traffic, God only knows. And I haven't seen that issue really addressed by any of the politicians. It's a very, very big one. They're going to have to do something. I suppose I should disqualify myself as having a conflict of interest, but I don't know what the hell they're going to do. The highway just won't handle what there is now.
Well, I remember back when Mike Harcourt was premier, I asked him when he was going to fix the Sea to Die Highway.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the nickname I had for it. He laughed. He said, it's not as bad as people think if people would just drive better. Well, unfortunately, there's something about people. We don't drive better, but it sure helps if we have proper highways.
Well, it does. And I happen to live right outside where most of the deaths happen. And it's where the 4-lane highway becomes a 2-lane highway. And it's just awful. We who live here just expect the ambulances every weekend particularly. And, Harcourt was right. And those who say if you drive carefully, it's not bad. Absolutely. That's right. You can say that about every highway. But this one happens to be a difficult one to drive, and people don't think that it is. It's full of sort of subtle curves and so on and so forth, and people get into trouble by going just a little bit over the speed limit. Now, I must say, Jim, as a real Democrat in most things, I did have a solution, and I think it still would work. I don't like having these electric speed traps, electronic speed traps and so on. But I can tell you this, if you had them, 3 or 4 of them, spotted where nobody knew where they were going to be on the Sea to Sky Highway, you'd save an awful lot of lives.
Well, I know when Ujjal Dosanjh was premier, he said that's the biggest reason to keep photo radar. He said, yes, some people will feel it's unfair and that they were trapped, but on the other hand, he had figures showing that the death rate on the highways had dropped. Well,
there's no question, and in a sense, I blame the police for that too. They put a lot of them in pretty nasty places with, just coming down at the bottom of the hill, that sort of thing. If they're properly placed, and if they're placed where people don't know they're going to be, it would make a huge difference. There's no question about that. They do have more roadblocks for speeding and so on, but that doesn't stop people. People know where they're going to be, and they watch carefully as they come to those kind of places, and away they go. And it's not just people from BC. People come from all over the continent to drive up here, and it's tough. I just don't know how they're going to handle it. I really don't.
Well, perhaps the developers should have to pony up for a highway improvement.
Oh, these things, though, are the unforeseen consequences for lots of dreamers who say, let's expand, let's do this, let's the other thing. They don't think of all of the consequences, and this is just one of them. It's not just the new ski hill either, Jim. I mean, Squamish is growing by leaps and bounds. It's become actually part of the Vancouver bedroom community. You can expect a natural increase in the traffic anyway, much less put in something like a new ski hill. I think it's supposed to be bigger than Whistler. My God, it's going to be very, very difficult. Now, what it means to Whistler and other communities up there in terms of unfair or otherwise competition, I'm not prepared to say. I'm not in the ski business, but no question about it. I don't think there's anybody along the sea to sky, left, right, or center, that doesn't say, oh my God, not more traffic.
Well, yes, fix it or perhaps improve transit to the area.
Well, that could be, although I must say that we're very lucky in Lions Bay. We've got pretty good bus service. And I should also tell people who may not know where Lions Bay is, it's not very far from Horseshoe Bay. So I'm not complaining if somebody says, oh my God, I'm going to have trouble getting home every day. It will make it more difficult. Oftentimes we've had to wait 2, 3, 4 hours to get home. But by and large, that's not the big problem there. The big problem is in the longer pull. And that's where you're going. If you have this kind of a situation going on all the way from here up to Whistler, then and you increase the traffic, then you're bound to have more and more and more fatalities.
I'm still surprised Whistler doesn't have a proper hospital.
Well, they've got a nice one in Squamish, I was surprised to find it. I had a bit of an emergency last year, and one of a jillion, and I wound up there, and it's pretty neat. Now, I don't know what its capacity is vis-a-vis the whole population and so on, so I should be careful what I say. But I can say it's modern, nice, clean, and it looks like it's got enough capacity. It may look that way because a lot of people don't even know about it. But it's there. But sure, you're right. These are the kind of things, though, that come when you put in new ski resorts. You need more health facilities. You need more education facilities. You need more sewer. You need all these things suddenly increase. Who is going to pay for them? Well, the promoter isn't going to pay for them. So you're going to have to get it from the people that live here. Now, some of it will come from new people that come along. I understand that. But by and large, there is an impact, a financial impact, and a social impact that never seems to be taken into account when these great enterprises are proposed. And I think most of us along here are worried about that. And you combine that with the possibility of an LNG plant in Squamish, and we who are living in the most gorgeous fjord in Canada are getting pretty concerned.
On the media side of things, Post media editorials now are coming out saying it's not a very good organization for journalism.
Well, I've got an article, if I may promote it, in the Common Sense Canadian, which just came out today, and I take a look at that, and it's not something that you and I can really devour, I suppose, in 5 or 10 minutes, Jim. It's been going on for a long, long time, but it's now a terrible situation. People still haven't got their heads around the fact that Post media are promoted and are in partnership with the oil industry. Now, not something subtle, something very, very real. And I've offered before, I'll send the physical evidence to anybody who wants to write me. But that's just part of it. A person, of my vintage, being told that all of a sudden the newspapers are actually directly in the hands of the most controversial industry in the world, I would say that can't happen. Don't be silly. No newspaper would have that happen. I would probably have said, I know that advertisers are often in the way and so on, but they would maintain that kind of independence would never happen. Well, it has happened. And we don't want to beat this to death, but we who are sitting watching the LNG situation in Squamish, look at the Vancouver Province newspaper in partnership with the people who are promoting it. Now, it didn't get that way just because of Post Media or just because of one or two newspapers. It got that way because slowly but surely the newspaper industry has not been able to handle change. And I don't know what the answers are. I really don't. As I say in this article, you can't just come up and say, now this is the answer, because there may not be one. But there's no question about it that Post Media, for one, is in terrible shape, and we who are served by it and it alone are not served at all. It's really sad to see, and I just don't like despair.
What would your suggestion be to improve the situation? Perhaps have hearings about becoming a monopoly in journalism and then not really caring about that monopoly?
I honestly don't know what it is, Jim. You know, it gets always, just like if they said in Watergate, follow the money. It gets down to money, and newspapers can't survive these days when advertisers basically won't let them do what they used to do. And there's an article in the Globe and Mail last week by a woman who writes for them saying, well, they can't have the newspapers go because they're so good at holding government's feet to the fire and keeping the establishment honest. Well, Jim, that's true. That's what they were, but that's not what they are now. They just aren't. And the people that used to do that, brilliant people that used to do that, the Von Palmers of the world, etc., are no longer able to do it. Now, I always say this, and I mean it very, very strongly. I don't blame these journalists for not doing it. If I were, you know, at their stage and had kids in school and all the rest of it, you've got to eat. You have to, the money come in, and you just have to go along. But that's the sad state. Those people are long gone. And that's why in this article I talk about Edward R. Murrow, my hero. He's been long gone for a long time, but he established a dignity as well as an ethic that's just, it's run right through journalism in North America, particularly for the last 50 or 60, 70 years. It's gone. It's gone because nobody will let anybody do it anymore. You only have to look, for example, because you're in the same business as I was, you only have to look at talk radio. And that's all the same thing as what's happening to Post Media. The same thing's happening to talk media. There aren't any Jack Websters anymore, and there won't be any Jack Websters anymore, because nobody will hire them in the first place because they can't handle it. No advertiser's going to put up with it. Now, I can tell you, in the 25 years that I was in the business, there wasn't a talk show host that I knew of that for 1 second would put up with any crap from advertisers or indeed from management. But that's gone. It's just gone. You either go along or you have to go.
Well, in newspapers, they now have what they call advertorials. It looks like a real newspaper article, but you'll notice maybe the review of that latest car model is super glowing and you want to go out and buy it because you think the journalist who tested that car is giving you their unbiased opinion.
Well, of course they're not. And I think, in fairness, that they have made that fairly plain in most of them, although you could easily be fooled. But what's worse than that, Jim, is you can see that, and you know after you've read the article that it was an editorial. But what about regular news stories, regular columnists, or regular editorial pages? That same thing goes on there, except they don't announce it. I mean, it isn't an accident that the Post Media and papers across Canada suddenly supported Harper in the last election. That didn't happen just accidentally. That happened because their advertisers said, look, we're the money guys in this world. We think he's the best guy for money guys, so support him. And so you've got an advertorial going on the editorial page. You got an advertorial going on either in what some of the columnists write or what they don't write, what they stay away from. And it's so, it's seeped with it now. And I know I'm sounding like I'm being critical of the people working in it. Not at all. They have no choice whatsoever. If they want to write, if they want to be in journalism, they have to take the game as it is being played. But I can tell you, it's you cannot simply believe anything. You can't take anybody at their word. Now, I use this example in the article I wrote, and most people don't even think about this. But think about this for a second. The Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Harper, asked a lawyer named Johnson, if he would come up with some guidelines for investigating the shenanigans of Brian Mulrooney with bags full of money in a New York courtroom, hotel room, and so on. He did, and the guidelines initially said, oh, leave him alone. You can't bother him, let him go. And so away he went. He whitewashed it. Well, God, before you could even finish reading the recommendations, this guy is the Governor General of Canada. Now, one writer, Rick Salutin, who I admire very much, writing for the Globe and Mail, he went after this. My God, the media, the captive media came into it, Andrew Coyne, etc. Oh, no. Mr. Johnson's a wonderful man, and the Prime Minister's a good, solid Canadian. They would never do anything bad. That's just a coincidence. Well, how many coincidences can you have? And it just tells us that nobody has got the guts to look at an issue like that and say, I don't care if it's the Governor General of Canada. I'm going to find out for the public whether or not this is kosher. If it is, well, fine, we'll let it go. If it isn't, we're going to tell them. No, it's made to appear as if it's disloyal, as if it's impolite to talk about how a Governor General became the Governor General. That's just one example, but if it happens at that level, you can be sure that further down the line, it's happening every day in articles that you read. And very quickly, before you run out of patience and I run out of breath, just take a look, for example, at the LNG situation right across Canada and the lack of criticism in the papers of the fracking method, of the pipelines, all of that sort of thing. You just don't read it. Well, is that not news? Of course it's news. But it's not news you publish if you happen to be partners with the fossil fuel industry. This is what we're faced with in Canada. This is what Postmedia is giving us now. It's what I understand is being given by similar journalistic outfits right around the world. And it's sad. And I have not got an answer. People, I know, will be writing you and saying, well, what the hell's the answer? Mayor's great to come up with all these criticisms. I just don't know. We've had newspapers for so long. We've got so used to them. They serve other purposes than just the news. If you want to buy a car or a house or a new puppy, all these things, you go to your newspaper. It's more than just the news. And I don't know what the answer is, but all I can tell you is that people believe for 1 second that they're getting the straight goods in public affairs from the newspapers of this country or anywhere else. They're mad.
Rafe, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
My pleasure always, Jim.
Take care. Both of us.
What's that?
I said both of us saying take care at the same time. We're both fighting off illness.
Yeah,
well,
right. Well, there we are. It's, you're not old, though. I've got an excuse.
I'd never put you there, Rafe. Thanks a lot.
Okay, my pleasure.
Bye-bye. My guest has been Rafe Mair, Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
In Goddard we trust. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.